They drove a cement truck across my bridge like it was a backroad shortcut, and the whole back end went right through. That sound with snapping, metal shearing. A truck settling into mud like a man sinking into an old secret, it's what made my neighbors come out. That, and the look on Lorraine Pierce's face when she realized the grand show she'd ordered had just embarrassed her in front of everybody. My name's Hank Mercer. I live just off Willow Hollow, and that bridge out behind my barn? I built it with my own 2 hands. The kind of thing you only do when you've got to cross something and no one else will help you do it. There's a kind of slow pride in building a thing that holds weight. You choose the boards, you watch them take the weather, you tighten the bolts until your fingers ache, and you think, for a while, that the world is the kind of place where what you make sticks. Lorraine came in wearing a blazer and a clipboard, and she didn't see the bridge so much as a symbol. She could straighten, trim the edges, polish the rules, make sure everyone bowed in the right way. That's how it started. Mailings, polite notes, a fine here, a friendly reminder there. To her, it was governance. To me, it was someone poking a finger at a thing that meant something. I'm not dramatic about things. I'm not a man who goes out looking for trouble. But when the HOA sends trucks heavier than my posted limit when they drive their equipment over my bridge, without a word, it stops being a technicality. It becomes a test. You can read the law until your eyes hurt, and still miss the part about respect. Lorraine had rules and a show of authority. I had the county stamp and a survey and photos dated and time-stamped, and a memory of the first time a board gave under the weight of a small truck, and how I had got down in the mud and fixed it myself. That's the thing about living in a place long enough. You learn the difference between what's written on paper and what's written in the quiet of other people's bodies. We had neighbors who were split down the middle. Sam Rivers, old mechanic, quick to laugh, quicker to stand with you when your dogs are stolen or your fence goes missing. He'd come over and help with a brace, maybe hand me a wrench, maybe pull out shingles with me at dusk. There was also Gretchen Vale, who liked order and did not like getting dirt on her shoes, and she found Lorraine's letters consoling, like someone finally putting the place back on a map. Those tiny alliances matter. They make crowds and meetings and the slow chipping away at someone's power. The escalation didn't happen overnight, but it did happen in a hurry once Lorraine decided a project needed a contractor with a big truck. She wanted to pave a stretch of community road for safety reasons, she said at the HOA meeting, with that small, practiced smile people use when they're about to spend other people's money. The contractor's insurance, the meeting minutes, the votes, all of that was tidy and precise. Nobody asked whether the truck could make it across my bridge. They simply sent the truck. I called and I said, "You can't do that. The bridge is not rated for that." I sent copies of the permit that acknowledged the path and where my property line was. I took pictures of the underside, the rod on the center beam. I did everything right, and the people with the clipboards did everything formal, and the truck rolled on like a storm with a permit. I admit, I felt something like a slow burn. Not anger as much as a disappointment that the whole conversation had gone sideways and become a display. Lorraine came by once to explain herself, which is bureaucrat for you. Calm, rehearsed, a repetition of chosen phrases. "Rules are rules," she said, leaning on the driftwood railing, clipboard tucked under her arm like a talisman. "We have to consider the whole community." Her eyes were bright when she said it, the kind of brightness that belongs to people who really believe in their own story. I didn't want to make it a spectacle. I didn't want mud-splattered headlines in the neighborhood chat. But people kept driving over that bridge, construction trucks, delivery rigs, the occasional county inspector who conveniently forgot to weigh the load. I started to document everything. Photos, timestamps, a log I kept in a small notebook my father gave me. I asked neighbors to sign statements when they saw heavy traffic. I filed letters that were polite and slow and formal, because if you want to prove something, you give the other side every chance to be decent. They didn't take it. So when you're the sort of person who has done the quiet things, who's fixed fences at midnight and carried someone's gas, when they run out on the highway, you get tired of the neat little gestures of power from people who've never lifted a sheet of plywood. Tired in a way that wants vindication, not for the pleasure of it, but to make clear that there are lines. I made a choice that I'm still not entirely proud of. I made the bridge something that would be honest about how it was used. Not to hurt anyone, not to destroy, but to let the truth of weight and consequence say what my words and paperwork could not. I won't give you a how-to. There's nothing fun in being the guy who shows other people how to make trouble. But I will tell you that when the cement truck pulled up that morning, there was a crowd already gathered. Lorraine arrived wearing her best indignation, and she had that look like she'd rehearsed the moment the entire board would clap when the work was done. She hopped down from her SUV and announced, loudly and for the cameras of wherever people put cameras nowadays, that the bridge had been inspected. It's structurally sound, she said with that same clipped breath. I had my camera too, and Sam had his phone, and people pushed out from porches like it was Sunday at the diner. The truck started across, and for a breath or two, maybe three, everything was ordinary. Tires, sun reflecting off metal, a line of dust. Then there was a sound like a tree snapping inside your lungs, and the back end of that truck crumpled down until it was sitting crooked in the middle of my creek, the concrete mixer grinding and whining. Men shouted, someone swore, and Lorraine's face did something human, then flash of panic, a beat of disbelief, a falter. She started to say something about liability, but the words were thin. The deputy who showed up, Deputy Morales, steady as a lamppost, walked up, looked at the scene, and then at me, and the whole thing shifted like a weather vane. If you were watching from your kitchen window, you would have seen every small, human detail. Lorraine's neat shoes caked with mud, the contractor's face draining, Sam rifling through his pockets, the truck driver shaking so his hands wouldn't move, but moving all the same. People always remember the big sound, the crash, the splintering, but they forget the quiet that follows, the flatness where you expect a chorus but get only the drip of water and the low hum of a dead engine. It's in that quiet that community judging happens, and it's rarely tidy. The investigation took a few days. I had my paperwork, which mattered more than it should in moments like that. The county official read the survey aloud in a tone that made it sound like a fable: property lines, permits, who had access where. The HOA board went into scramble mode. Statements, emergency votes, apologies that sounded like they were written on carbon paper. Lorraine offered an apology eventually later, in the back of the community center, where the lights feel colder, and it was the sort that tries to pull you into ecclesiastical absolution. I'm sorry if people felt offended. I never meant for, and on and on. There was a resignation, formal and neat. There was no parade. People didn't stand on porches and hoot. They went back to the ordinary things that hold a town together. Fixing a leaky roof, pulling weeds, bringing a casserole to someone who had surgery. For me, the lesson was smaller and sharper. It wasn't about making someone fall, it was about boundaries and respect, and the kinds of quiet courage it takes to stand your ground without turning it into a war. There's an old rhythm to living where you know the people who will show up with a plunger at midnight because you called, the ones who will come by and smoke a cigarette with you on the porch in the rain when you need to say a thing out loud and have someone listen. Lorraine lost her job on the HOA, but she got to keep a lot of things that people like her keep. Admiration from certain corners, a sense of being right. That's the trouble with rightness. Sometimes it comes with a cost you can't see until later. I tell this because the story is not a neat moral fable. You can side with whichever part of it makes sense to you: rules and order, or the stubborn, quiet labor of a man who built a bridge to cross a need. You can argue that I should have taken the slow road, sued, filed injunctions, appealed to the higher courts. Maybe you're right. Maybe the patience I had before the truck sprang was something I should have kept. But I also know that there are lines you don't cross in front of your neighbors, and when someone does and smirks about it, it changes the math of patience. So tell me what you think. Was it justice when the truck slipped and Lorraine's authority buckled? Or was it too much, a spectacle we should be better than? Drop your thoughts below. I want to hear whether you think boundaries are built from paperwork or from the stubbornness of hands that make things hold. Share if you know someone who's ever had to stand up for what's theirs. And if you're new here, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I'll be on the porch. Sam will probably be there with a coffee, and we'll keep telling these little stories, because they're the ones that make a place out of a patch of land.